Hey folks, name's Game. How's everybody doing? Hope you guys are doing good. I will be okay, but first, I need to put the salty. I need to put the salty everywhere, and I also need to explain how this video is going to work. So let's get into that right now. Put the salty is simply put a series of explanational rants mixed with the problems that video game related stuff has. So video game based mechanics, video game based characters, even video game based dev teams. Alright, we're going to talk about video game based stuff. And I think the best way to start is we're going to take an Overwatch character, solely Winston, one of my favorite characters, and talk about why they're bad. Now, to those out there who don't know, let's give a bit of an explanation. Overwatch is a game developed by Blizzard. You might have heard of those guys, you know, the guys who made StarCraft, World of Warcraft, Warcraft. They got a movie out a couple months ago that is about Warcraft. They got Diablo, they got Heroes of the Storm, they do all that. Earlier this year, they effectively released, for everybody out there in the world, Overwatch. And it's a first-person shooter, which is completely different from what they put out, which is basically a lot of strategy games and some action RPG. And they pop in to a little futuristic world where you have effectively a giant gorilla who hits people with a Tesla gun, jumps around like a nutcase, puts these dome shields down, and can sometimes go psychotically angry, doubling his health pool and such. That's Winston. Winston's a really cool dude, really cool gorilla, and I'm going to talk about why he's bad. Winston is bad due to 4 big reasons, these being DPS, shields, mobility, and his ultimate, which many argue is the worst one in the game. So without further ado, let's talk about each of those separately. DPS is probably the biggest flaw that Winston has, but there is actually a very good reason. As you can tell from here, you actually can see how low Winston's DPS is in comparison to every other tank. Why would you even get Winston? Well, all that other info data, that's basically why. Winston can hit multiple enemies at once. He can also pierce Reinhardt's shield, which very few other weapons actually do. I think the other one is Symmetra's weapon, which no one, uses the character anyway, so, what's the point? And it actually has some pretty nice range in comparison to Reinhardt's weapon, which I actually thought was the difference. To be honest, I thought the Tesla was lower than the hammer, range-wise, which is a big deal. But the other big thing about the weapon that I didn't really put on there, because it's not really something that you would know, it actually doesn't need to aim as much as the other weapons in the game, because it effectively hits a wide radius, and in a sense, seems to be really accurate for effectively just randomly spewing electric Tesla line things. It's weird, but it's such a nice weapon because of that, and that's why the DPS is so low. It's why the weapon has such low DPS in the first place, and it's understandable. I never said that it's something that he needs to get buffed. I said that that's his negative. His DPS is abysmal, but there's very good reason why. I believe you can actually hit everybody on the enemy team with it, so that's effectively at the most 360 DPS on a single effing weapon across the entire enemy board, which is a bit of a big deal. So, yeah. That's basically why his DPS is so abysmal. I never said it was bad, I just said that it's, or needs to get buffed. I just said that his DPS is bad. So, next up is shielding, and shielding is something that Winston actually needs a bit of a buff in, and the reason I say this is due to cooldowns in comparison to utility when it comes to these shields. First off, Zarya shields do 2 things that I find to be very good about them, and one of them is effectively going to be nerfed in the Overwatch update. They're effectively nerfed in the PTR right now. But anyway, Zarya shields make you immune to negative effects, such as, say, Mei's slow, or Roadhog's hook, or stuff like that, and you lose that benefit. You lose a lot of that benefit when the shield is obviously gone, which is why the shields last so little, and why they absorb so little health. It's why that is. However, her shield cooldowns are still lower than Winston's. Isn't that crazy? D.Va's defense matrix is the next one up, and it technically doesn't really have a shield strength. It's effectively infinite. You can't really break the damn thing, but it does have a duration, effectively of up to 4 seconds. The player can choose whether or not to start screwing around with the shield. But the most important thing about the shield is it can actually eat some ultimates, and it recharges over time when not used. It takes at the most 10 seconds to get the 4 seconds back, so that's basically that. But about that ultimate consuming thing, that is actually true. D.Va can basically walk up to a Hanzo, the Hanzo can attempt to fire an arrow for, you know, the you go take you out around dragons, you know, and stuff like that. D.Va can basically just eat it. She just obliterates the arrow, it doesn't do anything, and then Hanzo's just sitting there getting really disappointed as he is about to be pelted to death with mech shotguns. So yeah, kind of a big deal in regards to that. And then you have Reinhardt. Now Reinhardt's shield basically lasts until the player says, alright, go away, I'm going to start beating people to death with a hammer, or it gets blown up to bits, and then you have to wait a while, which is disappointing. After a 3-second delay of not using it, it recharges at a rate of 225 a second, which equates to about 9 seconds. It might be 250, which makes it 8, but for this case in point, we're just going to go with 225. So yeah, either way, that's still lower than Winston's 13 seconds. And Winston's 13 seconds don't start until that shield gets destroyed, which can be pretty quick, and it can also be pretty late. So, what do I mean by this? The shield's cooldowns, and this is for all of them, do not start until the shield is effectively destroyed. So, Zarya's shields will still have 10-second cooldown until the shields get destroyed immediately, or, say, last forever. And this is the same with Winston. So in a sense, Winston can effectively have a rough 18 seconds cooldown for a shield if you, say, put it in a bad spot. And enemies don't really give a damn about touching the damn thing, which is extremely crippling and crucial to know. That's also a very fair thing in its own right, but that's how it is. But the big thing about Winston's shield is its duration, which is 5 seconds. For 600 health, that equates to about 120 a second, and it is better than a Zarya shield in that right, but then it has a 13-second cooldown, and if you take that 18 seconds, you get effectively... It's a pretty low number, actually. It's about 33 stuff protecting from, you know, a second. 33 shield strength per second on the overall duration combined with cooldown and such, and that's pretty damn disappointing. But the other thing was, it used to have 1,000, but it didn't lower the cooldown at all. So it used to have 1,000 health, it got lowered to 13, and it got lowered to 600, sorry, and the cooldown remained the same, which is kind of disappointing because you figured they would lower it down a little bit. Okay, weaker shields, but a little bit lower cooldown, it's fine. They didn't do that, kind of sucks. Let's move on. Mobility. Mobility. There's only 3 tanks that have very good mobility, and that's Winston, obviously, Reinhardt, and D.Va. And they both have different types of mobility. Winston has vertical mobility, Reinhardt has horizontal mobility, so flat ground, obviously, and D.Va is free roaming mobility, which means, F you, I'm just gonna go, you know, swerve around and do all this crazy stuff in my little thing. And you also have different rates of movement, and they have different maximum ranges. They do all kinds of different things. But the really big thing here is D.Va's mobility compared to Winston's. Yes, she does move about 40% slower than Winston does, and such, but she does actually get some very little bits of better maximum possible range, effectively, due to that free roaming utility, due to the fact that she is going horizontal compared to vertical like Winston does. And additionally, D.Va can stop at any time to start attacking again, which helps with the fact that she does have ranged weapons. Winston sadly does not have ranged weapons. He has a short range style Tesla gun, which more or less needs to be in enemies' faces to do the damage, which is a bit disappointing. And then you have Reinhardt's mobility, which is faster than D.Va's. It is on a flat ground. It does have the maximum possible range. but it also does extreme damage to make up for the fact that it is strictly horizontal. And a lot of these maps have very tight areas where that, vertical height is not going to do you much good, but it's fine because, jump pack does the most damage out of these 3 mobility skills, as you can see, outside of, obviously, Reinhardt pinning someone to the wall. So, what exactly is the problem here? When it's not in those tight areas, you get 500,000 seconds of air time for you to do your really sick tricks in the air, such as the monkey shuffle or whatever these effing, cool tricks are to do in the air, before you finally land back down on the ground. And that is the problem with some of these open maps, because you'll end up being flown into the air because of your jump pack, because it's just strictly vertical mobility, and you will be forced to get into a bit of some sticky situations, such as, say, a Bastion piddling you from a distance with 500,000 rounds per second, which can cripple you a lot in the long run, and is why vertical mobility is not super great. Guess who else has vertical mobility? Pharah. Guess who else is kind of bad? Pharah. Ooh, wow, isn't that great? So with that said, you kind of get that idea there. Now, we're going to talk about the ultimates strictly, but we're going to keep them separate. So Reinhardt, D.Va, and Zarya's, because of how they are, because of their utility, of how they're basically F you, get away, or you're stunned, or, just disable, or just keep them away, we're just going to compare Primal Rage on Winston to Whole Hog on Roadhog. Both of them are ultimates that basically focus around knocking people back with damage. And the big thing with Roadhogs is Roadhog can actually start pelting you from a distance. Okay, he doesn't need to walk up to you to start knocking you back, kind of deal, like Winston does. Winston has to, and I'm pretty damn sure that a Roadhog using Whole Hog can keep a Primal Rage Winston away from him. That's pretty nuts, to be honest, but that's how good the knockback is on Whole Hog. That's how beneficial it can be. It is not based on distance, it's constant. There might be a little bit based on distance, but it's so little that it doesn't effing matter. So, that's basically that. It just feels like Primal Rage is really bad as well, just due to the amount of crap you have to deal with, such as Mei slowing you in place, Zenyatta effectively going here, take 30% extra damage, and also the fact that because of that extra health, because it's all raw health, you're a giant effing meat shield for all of the shotgun characters, such as Reaper, or Roadhog, or even D.Va, because yes, her weapon is a shotgun. A very fast shotgun. But either way, they can rip you apart, they can rip you a new butthole, and our good gorilla here does not want to have a new butthole ripped for him, because that would be very painful. So, basically, his ultimate seems to be really bad because of that. And with Mei getting little buffs here and there, with Zenyatta getting buffs, with all these characters that already cripple a Primal Raged Winston getting buffs, it does cripple Winston a lot, because his ultimate becomes worse and worse and worse. And with all that said, I'm going to go into Sombra, who is the new character that is to be released in less than a week, who is in the PTR right now, but will be out in the game soon. And we're going to talk about how Winston goes against her, since we all know how Winston is compared to every other character in the game so far. To those outside who do not know, he's very good with snipers, he's very good with supports, he gets screwed by shotgun characters like all other tanks do, yada 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 saspoomba. I just want to talk Sombra. The big thing with Sombra that I'm really curious about is hacking and the camo. Now, with the camo, it stops as soon as she takes damage, which is where Winston's weapon comes in very handy. But the hacking is where I actually want to talk about, because as far as I know, and I don't know how Whole Hog and Deadeye go as ultimates, I'm pretty sure they get classified as channels, which is why they get stopped by hacking and whatnot, but you see these ultimates get stopped by Sombra's hack-based skill. And that's something very, very important to do on Winston, who, like those characters, has a duration-based ult. So if it stops the ult entirely, which I'm pretty sure it doesn't, because that would be very, very stupid, you know, that's really bad for Winston. But the other thing is, even if it doesn't stop the ultimate, it does stop the jump pack. 2-second cooldown compared to 6-second cooldown from being beneficial to Winston, which puts him in a really crappy spot because, as I said, it's one of the worst ultimates in the game. It's very flawed when it comes to everything, and the reason why that jump pack gets a 2-second cooldown is because it lets Winston get away. And if Winston can't get away, it's very, very sad. And in regards to hacking on the health kits, a Winston with health kits is a Winston who is very happy, because you really want to have those health kits when you're jumping around and doing this and everything else, because Winston does have low armor compared to the other tanks, or say Roadhog. But the big thing with Roadhog is, even though he does not have armor, he does get built-in healing, which is what allows Roadhog to survive a little bit better compared to Winston in the long run. And he also has a good shotgun, so if you try to get close, he will rip you a new butthole. So with all that said, okay, with Somber getting into the game, with how Winston is, Winston just seems to be a little weak right now compared to the other tanks, and D.Va gets buffed up the effing zoo, so you have to really question, why have a Winston when I can have a D.Va? So, with all that said, what does Winston actually need? What are the ideas of buffs? Here are the ideas that I have, and they might not be great to anybody out there, they might not be good, they might be completely effing garbage, but we're going to talk about these little things here and there. The shield, okay, put that shield on a slightly lower cooldown, a little cooldown reduction on the shield. So instead of being 13 seconds, it's either 10 or 11. That's it. That's all. That's the little change. Just that. And it's not super bad, because the rest of the shields effectively internally have about 10-second cooldowns in their own right. It lets the shield be a bit more spammier, which helps Winston out, which does help his team out, without causing the character to be too broken. It doesn't really cripple anything on the character's design as a whole. So with that said, a little cooldown reduction on the shield would be okay, and not make Winston broken. Another suggestion is to have a secondary attack during Primal Rage that is basically just a normal attack but doesn't do knockback. So you basically choose whether or not you knock enemies 500 miles away or keep them next to you to wail on them. And this means that it benefits Winston a lot for just everything. You can keep someone still, you can wail on them, you don't have to try to go around them to say wail them into your team, or say just chase after them in case you did a bit of a screw up and they're now 500 feet away. It lets you keep enemies where you want them and wail on them, because you can't really deal with a Primal Rage Winston as one person, and by knocking people away you kind of let them group up again. So that's basically the reasoning there. The third suggestion is a mix of the two that I suggested, simply because it requires, or regards anyway, Primal Rage and the shield. Just let the shield be usable during Primal Rage. No instant cooldown reset, nothing crazy like that. I'm just asking if it can be usable during Primal Rage. That's it. It doesn't make any effing sense whatsoever in regards to everything that Winston goes through with Primal Rage. It doesn't make any sense for a giant rampaging gorilla to just quickly just put a shield down wherever. But it's a nice buff to Winston as a character, and I think it would make him more viable in the long run. You know, go Primal Rage, put a shield down, kind of run away sort of deal. You know, gives you a few extra seconds of hopefully living before you either get ripped to shreds or whatever, and it's a nice way to buff Winston without making him too crazy. That's basically it. That's the first put the salty. Give me some actually like aggressive and hard feedback, because honestly, it took me a while to do this in the first place. When comes down to everything. So yeah, be hard on me. Not too hard, obviously, when it comes to the feedback. Give me some good, honest feedback, and tell me what you guys would like to see in regards to that. If you guys have any ideas at all for new Put the Salties, give me an idea in the comments below, and a new Put the Salty will be coming out soon, equating to maybe at the most 10 days from now. So, with all that said, have a good one, guys, and I've put the salty, and now it's time to shake it off the table. That's a very bad outro, but we're going to keep it anyway. Bye!